Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, we've got an interview for our lovely listeners today, a little bonus interview again. And normally this is the spot where I say, well, I know how you are, Kieran, because we spoke just 3 seconds ago. I'm pretty much doing the same thing. I've confused myself, Kieran, but there's actually 3 days between when our last show and this going out. But there's not 3 days between you and I talking. It's actually still time is really running away with me, Kieran.
You turned me to Doctor Who.
I couldn't be more physically different to that beautiful, beautiful Doctor Who that we've got now than. I'd love to be somewhere in the future. In fact, somewhere in a different universe, Kieran. Doctor Who looks like I do, and is a bit grumpy, and he gets there in the end. Normally, that'd be quite. I think a lot of people would watch a Doctor Who episode where I get there just too late to stop the Daleks destroying everything. But I've got a pint of Guinness in my hand and a packet of pork scratchings again. I should not have stopped at the Parson's Arms, should I? I should not have time travelled back to the Parson's Arms 1979 to see Palace win promotion again. Our interview is with Brendan Guilfoyle, who has a Palace link because he was the administrator at Crystal Palace back in 2010. He's also administrator at Leeds and Plymouth. And we spoke to Brendan about how, I suppose, the business of administration has changed since that time. And this is what Brendan had to say. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We do have a lot of questions for you. My wife persuaded me to cross out most of the Palace ones. But there is one particular one I can't not ask you later on. It's not about Simon Jordan. Don't panic. Let's start, though, Brendan, by just asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before you got into football.
Yeah, well, my background was I was a chartered accountant and at a very early age specialised in insolvency. And that was just vanilla insolvency, small builders, SMEs. And then, by chance, one of the major firms who were getting involved in Leeds United asked me to get involved in Leeds United. So it was the so-called Ridsdale era, and I did the investigation into the board of directors of that club, Leeds United, at that time. And that got me into football. And then, so it kind of snowballs. Then we had a call from a client who'd acquired Luton Town. And when he got there, he found that the amount of money Luton Town were expecting him to invest was far more than had been represented to him. So he basically rang us up and said he wanted to pull the plug on Luton Town, which he did. So, I went to Luton Town, and then it just continued. I got a reputation for knowing how to deal with these football clubs. It's fair to say the major firms didn't have a lot of appetite for dealing with them because there was always uncertainty where you would get your fees from. Because in simple terms, at the end of the day, you got paid by the purchaser. So if the purchaser didn't provide the money, you were out of pocket. So it was, to some extent, slightly open field. And then I dealt with Luton, I dealt with Plymouth Argyle, I got into rugby league with the Bradford Bulls as well. And that's probably as many as I can recollect.
That's interesting, Brendan. You've preempted the question I was going to ask you later on, which is how are administrators appointed? Because I wondered if it was like a barrister type thing, first cab off the rank. But essentially, a mate just phones you up, or somebody at the club phones you up and asks you to sort them out.
Well, in general terms, yeah, you're asked by the club to come in because they've run out of cash typically. Particularly it's no different now, I don't think, is it? In the EFL, in the English Football League Championship, all these clubs are run on a benefactor model, which means that they've got a benefactor somewhere who's covering the losses as they seek to get to the Premiership. So generally, you would get invited in by the board of directors. So you'd have a period of time when you could do some due diligence and then get ready to take the appointment. But the Crystal Palace one was unusual in that that was what we call a hostile appointment. So the board of directors did not invite us in. In fact, it was a secured creditor who'd been spooked, if you like, not a very good word, but I can't think of a better one, who'd been spooked by a winding up petition. So there was a secured creditor who had the right to appoint. By now, we've moved on to the days of receivers. We've moved to administrator. There's a secured creditor with the right to appoint an administrator, and spooked by the knowledge that HM Revenue and Customs, bless them, had issued a winding up petition. He asked us to come in. So we were unexpected arrivals at the club.
Yeah, I really generally don't want to get too much into the details of a specific clubs especially that one, because we will be here all day. Were you a football fan, Brendan, before you got involved then in the financial aspect?
Yeah, I am. I'm a massive football fan. I call myself Tottenham in the north. I live in the north of England, and I'm a Spurs fan for my sins. So. Right, and
were you a football fan before you got into working in the game?
Yes, yeah, Spurs fan all my life. Yeah. And ironically, where I was brought up, I live in the north now, but I was brought up in southeast London. The local club would have been Crystal Palace. But
were you? Well, so we got three South London boys. Where were you brought up, Brendan?
Bromley.
Oh, well, the wrong, as we call it, the wrong side of Croydon. But from your point of view,
Bromley, Kent. Yeah, my mum thought it was the country when we first moved there.
The reason I'm interested in asking whether you were a football fan before you got involved in this is because many people will say to us, they have done on the pod, why should a football club that's in financial difficulties be treated differently to other businesses? So would you take a different approach to a football club going into administration than you would say to a greeting card company? And would it help, do you think, would it be better if the administrator had no knowledge of football at all, so he didn't get caught up in the emotional side of things?
I could see that argument about the emotion. In terms of would you treat the club any different, there are nuances in football clubs, mainly surrounding the big challenge when you walk in, irrespective of how you got there, is how do you keep these players' wages paid? And so you have to treat it differently. But and indeed you do, because there's the insolvency legislation, but overriding that, because as you guys identify, this football league is just a group of clubs. There's nothing else. It's just that's all it is. It's the clubs looking after their own affairs. They have a rule book that says certain creditors are football creditors, and those football creditors have to be paid in priority to all other creditors upon the exit from the administration. And of course, that greatly offends HM Customs and Excise, their preferential rights. So the requirement of my time, I think it's still the same, was to exit. This is getting technical now, was to exit the administration through a voluntary arrangement, through an agreement with creditors. So HM Customs and Excise would always vote against that. But in most instances, they're outvoted by a massive debt due to the footballers. Because the trick is the footballers aren't paid during the administration. So it's very different from, say, you were running a construction company. If you wanted to keep the wheels turning and the buildings going up, you'd have to pay the wages of the employees. But in football, you don't.
And what do you make of that football creditors rule? Because
I like it because it provides the means to rescue football clubs. What happens in my day was, and we didn't blast this around the place, but I don't think there's any harm now. It's a long time ago. You went to the PFA. And you had an agreement with the PFA. The PFA is the richest union in the world, I think, certainly in this country. And the PFA would loan the players money. So the players would go unpaid, but the PFA would loan them money. And then upon the exit from the administration, the PFA, the players have to be paid, and then the players would be able to repay the PFA. So it was a great help. Without the football creditor rule, then the footballers, I think it's after a period of 2 months of unpaid wages, they can terminate their contracts. So if you've got valuable players, you've got to sell them quick if you can't pay them. So this accommodation with the PFA was a great help in calming everything down. And they would send their representatives. I had, being a football fan and, did you meet this player? Did you meet that player? I had little or no contact with players. The PFA would send their representative down. He'd talk to me and my people, and then he'd go off and sort the employees out, as it were.
I'd like to bring Kieran here, Brendan, because Kieran has some insolvency experience himself. Do you agree, Kieran, with Brendan on the football creditors rule? Do you think it's, in terms of the club itself, it's a good one?
From what Brendan's saying, it's certainly beneficial during the conduct of the administration or receivership. I think the issue which upsets so many people is that if there are outstanding transfer fees, if there's money owed to players, and they are treated in priority to local suppliers, then that, from an emotional point of view, is very upsetting. I do like the fact that creditors are guaranteed effectively 25% minimum of what's owed to them on exit, because, as we've discussed on many times on the show, if you're a local supplier, you tend to give extended credit to the football club, which you wouldn't give to somebody else. So this is a way of getting that back. The downside, as Brendan will also know, is that it therefore increases the minimum price that's acceptable to the administrator on exit. And if that price isn't achieved, then you've got a bigger problem.
I suppose, Brendan, as well, in terms of players, the other challenge is fending off predatory bids from clubs who assume you have to sell players and sell them cheap, as we saw with Nathaniel Klein.
Oh, I don't remember Nathaniel Klein, but sell players and sell them cheap. Well, there is an imperative on the administrator, or there was on me, to generate large sums of money to keep the club going, because it's not just wages. And so if you had a valuable player and could effect a transfer, then that would be great. And my recollection at Palace was that I remember the team were on a plane to Newcastle, so it must have been a cup game, because
it was, yeah.
Yeah, you'd know. And I got a message to that plane that Victor Moses was not to play, to the benching, which upset Neil Warnock quite a bit. He wasn't upset that I'd taken that step. He was more upset that it leaked, and therefore Newcastle would have a good idea of what his tactics might be. So we in fact sold Moses for 2.5 million, I think. 2.5 million to Wigan. And in fairness to Neil Warnock, he was pleased that Victor had gone to Wigan. He thought Wigan and their manager at the time would be a good fit. So that's a sale I remember. There was a sale just before I arrived of a player called Fonte, is it?
Jose Fonte, yeah.
I don't remember Klein, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It might be that you fended off the transfer, because I know there are people hovering, but I think Newcastle were in the Championship at the time, so it was a league.
Oh, is that why? I did wonder.
It was a league. Well, if I'd been thorough, I would have checked the Nathaniel Klein thing.
Yeah, I would have checked as well. Yeah,
rather than relying on my memory. But no, we
because it seemed a bit early for a cup game, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a league game. We came off. The players came off the plane 10 points worse off than they went on.
They did.
It, basically,
you get a 10-point deduction for going into administration.
That's right. Yeah. This is a very simple question, Brendan, but I ask it because I know the answer, but I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of football fans don't know the answer. When you go into a club, whether you're invited or not, Palace, Luton, Plymouth, Leeds, whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
To whom is your first responsibility? Because it's not the fans, and many football fans, I think, have this idea in their head that when an administrator comes in, the fans are their first responsibility. But I don't think that's the case, is it?
Not at all. No, they'd be. I mean, they would be a long way down the ladder, as it were. I mean, strictly speaking, your first responsibility is to the court, but you've generally got creditors who've got security, like a bank, or in my case, it was a hedge fund. So they're the ones you owe a duty of care to, and then the other big duty of care is to creditors. So technically, again, when the club goes into administration, all the season ticket holders become creditors, and then their debt reduces as the games are played, as the games are fulfilled, as the fixtures are fulfilled. Sorry. So you have to count them, and you have a creditors meeting, and fans can be there. So, but generally, it's the secured creditors that, because of their security and their leverage, they're putting more pressure on you than say the fans. But having said that, I've had, you would meet the fans out of courtesy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It must be difficult, Brendan. You mentioned the emotion. It must be difficult to block out the noise at a football club when there is so much emotion involved. There's so much worry. Most of the staff that may lose their jobs are fans of the club. The fans, of course, are expecting you to save the club. It must be a challenge to just keep the focus on what your actual job is.
It is. What happened at Plymouth, for example, was that the fans, they take a great deal of interest, and like Kieran, they're always on the internet looking at the accounts and everything, but they take a great deal of interest in who you're selling to. So one of our strategies for raising money was to find a preferred purchaser and then get that preferred purchaser to give us cash to fund the running of the club. So in other words, we're selling exclusivity around the negotiating table. And at Plymouth, the guy we gave that status to was not liked by the fans. So there were massive campaigns for me not to sell to him. And that became very difficult. Yeah, that was difficult. And in the end, they were right and I was wrong. It turned out he had some money that he gave me, but he didn't have enough money. And so their man, the man they preferred, got the club. So you can get campaigns against purchasers or potential purchasers.
I am particularly interested in that crucial job of finding a buyer, Brendan. But before we talk about that in more detail, I'm also very... Does each club present a different set of challenges? Or when you're going into any club that goes into administration, do you have a kind of tick box already? Each club will have the same issues?
Well, they're all slightly different, but the approach is the same. Your aim is to make sure the club fulfills its fixtures. So it's got to keep on playing its games, otherwise it will be thrown out of the league. And the other thing to do is find a purchaser. So you're looking for someone who's going to pass the fit and proper test, as it was at the time, and has got the cash to do it.
This is the one specific. This is the one specific Palace question. Before we get back to the finding a buyer, what level of detail in savings, for example, do you go down to? Because my favourite rumour about you at Palace, or urban myth if you prefer, was that you claimed that our grass seed was too expensive. That's the one, and I checked that on WhatsApp groups, and I went, I remember, Brendan Guilfoyle said we were spending too much on grass seed. We had to get a less expensive. But that's more of an indication of how football fans work, because rumours always circulate. But are you micromanaging?
No, not at all. Not at all. No.
You're not. Okay.
No. You're trying to rise above it. You're fixed with raising cash to keep the business going. So you're looking for someone who might fund you. You're looking to sell players and keep that business turning over. Keep the games coming. Of course, you've got to provide. I used to have to get my credit card out to pay for the coach at one club. Yeah. Oh, they're going on an away game. Can you pay for the coach? The coach won't go without being paid. Because as Kieran said, local creditors do get burned. But no, it's you try to be at the upper level, and the day to day you generally achieve by keeping the staff in place, so you continue to employ the staff. And unlike the footballers, you have to pay them because they need the money, and they got to put the food on the table every week.
I'm going to disappoint a lot of Palace fans now by having to tell them that you had no interest in the grass seed whatsoever.
I remember, no. I used to like the eagle, but I can't remember the grass seed.
There was one controversy, though, you remember, Brendan, when you took a table at the end of season Football League Awards, which is still mentioned every now and again. Is that something you regretted?
No, I didn't take the table. It's what's his name from the Daily Mail, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can't remember. It comes up every time you do a search. 2 Palace fans took the table and invited me to come along. So it wasn't paid for out of the administration. There was I can't remember his name now. And the player, it was the Crystal Palace player who was up for nomination for an award, didn't turn up anyway. So he called me and said I was eating quail. I didn't know it was quail. I thought it was chicken.
Well, according to the Mail, it was quail, as the two Ronnies.
Yeah,
as the two Ronnies might say. I think
it was chicken.
Yeah.
What would the South London boy know about quail?
Well, I wasn't expecting to have this conversation, Brendan, I have to say, but you've scotched another urban myth that Palace fans are going to have to get rid of.
No, I did go to that dinner.
I know you did, but the assumption was, fed by the media, that you'd paid for the table out of our money.
No, certainly not. Okay. No.
Let's talk about the most important part of your job, which is, as we've hinted, finding a buyer for the club. Yeah. How do you... First of all, how do you go about that? Are you already aware of potential buyers before you go in, or are you putting the club on the market yourself, so to speak?
Yeah, no. In generally putting the club on the market myself. So the standard, Kieran will know this, the standard way of advertising the business for sale was to put an advert in the Financial Times, which seems to me a bit of a waste of time because not too many football people read the Financial Times, but there is, I don't know whether it's still there, there was a section, businesses for sale, so you put your advert in there, but then it's just asking around. So the Palace story is really good because in that case, I went to see Ron Nodes. Do you remember Footballers' Wives?
Indeed.
Ron Nodes has got the swimming pool. It was his pool.
I know.
So I'm shown into this house and I see the swimming pool from Footballers' Wives and think, oh, I must be in the right place. And it was Ron who said to me, I'll buy the ground off you, and we'll probably come to this. I said, I haven't got the ground. I've just got the club.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I said, who do you think might buy it? And he said, Steve Parish.
Really?
Go and see a bloke called Steve Parish. He's been putting money into the club in sponsorships, and I think he'll do it. And so it came about. I went to see Steve. He was really cool. Another South London boy.
Yeah.
He was
Bromley.
He was very capable, and he sort of said to me, wasn't negotiating at all. Just said to me, well, yeah, I'd like to do it. I need to get a few more guys involved, and then I'll come back to you. And he got the guy from Churchill Insurance.
Yeah,
I can't remember the names, and another
Steve Browett,
vintner.
Steve Browett, Jeremy Hoskin.
There were 3 of them initially.
4 of them, and then they got 3, and then they got a 4th one.
Yeah.
Is that the nightmare scenario then for an administrator, that you go to a club that doesn't own its own ground?
No, you can cope with all these things. Obviously, if you don't own the own ground, the purchaser can come to terms with the landlord to rent it. Most of them are restricted. You can't turn them into houses because most of them have got restrictions on them saying they're for football. And this is increasing now, isn't it, with community assets and the like. Although Palace's on first indication was attractive because it already has a supermarket at one end of the ground, isn't it? So it might appeal to people to think they could do it. But the nightmare is not being able to find a purchaser. Taking on a club that, for various reasons, is so complicated or nobody's interested. That's the nightmare scenario, where you have to preside over the liquidation of a football club, something I never wanted to do at all, because I was a football fan. So there have been a few in the lower leagues who've gone out of business, but that's the nightmare scenario, not being able to find a purchaser.
But you never presided over a situation like that, did you?
No, never want to. I'd resign first.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd pull out and let someone else do it. Yeah.
For want of a better word, Brendan, is there a moral element involved in finding a buyer? Can you afford to, if somebody approaches you with a bid to buy the club and they have the money, can you afford to say, I'm not sure they're suitable, but they've got the money, so I'll just let the league worry about whether they are fit and proper persons? Or would you actually turn down buyers if you thought they were from a shady background?
In theory, when you've got a purchaser, you do some due diligence on them. You get their help to give you stuff, because what you want to do is anticipate the Football League. The last thing you'd want to do is have a purchaser and then go to the Football League and be rejected because they're not fit and proper. So there would be a degree of due diligence, and that was becoming, the fit and proper test was becoming tougher and tougher, So you want someone who's going to pass that test and not take someone, because invariably we would be telling a purchaser how to approach things. Not many people have got experience of buying football clubs. I remember in the case of Steve Parish, he said he was interested, and I said, do me one favour, get yourself a decent lawyer who knows what he's doing. And he asked me to name one, and I did. Well, I think he asked me to name one, and I did, and he used that lawyer, so it made it a lot easier. There was an understanding of what we required.
Do you think the fit and proper persons test goes far enough now?
No, I don't know. I don't know where it is at the moment, but I don't know. I mean, you look at all the chaos there is. Is chaos the right word? I don't know.
Yeah.
But all the chaos there is with these American owners moving from one club to another, arguing amongst themselves. But I don't know. They're all fit and proper. They've not been to prison or anything. But it could go a bit further, couldn't it? Just to maybe see what their intentions are.
I presume as well, because I wanted to ask you how you were at Palace in 2010. I wanted to ask you whether the role of administrator has changed as well since then. But I presume we're increasingly seeing multi-club ownership now. I imagine that would be a terrible scenario if one of those clubs was to go into administration, when you're threatening to bring the whole lot down. That would be very difficult for someone like you to go into, wouldn't it? Kieran, what's your view on that? If a club like Melbourne City were to get into financial difficulties, unlikely considering who owns them, but would you be able to do a separate administration on one club within a multi-club group?
Yes, you would, because they're separate legal entities. So therefore, somebody could appoint an administrator on an individual part of the group. And we've seen this, and Brendan will have experienced this as well in other industries. From a moral hazard point of view, if you've got part of the City Football Group going into administration and then you've got Manchester City paying a £430 million a year wage bill back here in England, reputationally, the City Football Group would struggle. But they'll just take that on as part of the overall running of the business. So that's why you see many organisations. Mike Ashley, I think, is quite famous for this in Sports Direct. Every Sports Direct branch is a separate company, which gives flexibility. You've got compliance costs with that, but it does give flexibility in terms of how you organise them.
Brendan, there aren't many football fans in the country who aren't worried about the finances of their club at every moment of the day. How do we stop clubs going into administration in the future? A lot of our listeners have argued that they would like to see the EFL, for example, doing more to identify ailing clubs before it gets to the administration stage. Would that be something you'd be a fan of?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think Kieran can speak for this. I think that's already happening. They are filing their accounts now. I think with the league regularly, and the league are, I think, keeping an eye on things. I defer to Kieran though. I've been out now for nearly 10 years, so I'm not up to date. But yes, I think it's a good thing that they're monitored. Yeah.
Is that happening on a formal basis, Kieran? Would the EFL be spotting red flags and warning clubs that they're heading for danger?
Yes, I mean the EFL, and certainly when we've had Neil Doncaster on from Scottish football, they keep an eye on outstanding payments to HMRC. EFL clubs and Premier League clubs are now obliged to tell the authorities if they are late with payments to the tax authorities, and that's a classic red flag, because you tend to use non-payment of tax as an easy way out of dealing with cash flow issues. So there are extra responsibilities. The EFL in particular now has a sort of accountants who wear their underpants outside their trousers, who go round and keep a look at those clubs which are on a watch list. I've got my watch list of clubs. The EFL have got far more details than I have. They know who to go, and also to try to nudge them into doing the right things. Perhaps that might involve creating a budget. Perhaps it might involve sort of walking them hand in hand through particular issues. But especially under Trevor, we are big fans of Trevor and Trevor Birch and the changes that he's made. There's been a significant improvement in the last few years.
I've got one final question for you, Brendan. It's been really interesting to talk to you. As you'll discover, my final question is less serious than the rest. The administrator of Wigan Athletic suggested there should be a statue built of him for saving the club. Which of the clubs that you've? Yes, absolutely. So, which of the clubs you've been in, Brendan, would you rather have your statue at?
It'd be defaced, wouldn't it? I enjoyed I didn't enjoy it at the time, but I enjoyed the administration of Crystal Palace. It had a good outcome. I don't know, we were talking about the fixtures. The final game was a cliffhanger. You needed 1 point to stay up, and Palace held on. And then to watch them stay there for a while and then get into the Premier League is very satisfying. So Palace, but build it outside Tesco's.
Thank you so much, Brendan.
Well, it's been fun. I'm going to go and get me breakfast now.
Kieran, I know it's a world that you know very well, but I am particularly interested in the answer that Brendan gave about the moral dimension of finding new owners. This idea of whether or not it's an administrator's job to second guess how new owners might fare in an owners and directors test, or is it up to the administrator just to find anybody who wants to buy the club? And then if the Football League later on say, we don't approve, it's no longer their issue.
The administrator's obligations are wholly towards the creditors of that football club. They have to generate the greatest return. The club coming out of administration would have to pass the owners and directors test with regards to whoever is going to be at the head of the club. So that would be something which would be taking place in parallel. But effectively, the responsibilities, the moral and ethical obligations would be outsourced to the EFL or the National League or the Premier League, or depending on whoever the club is with regards to it going into administration in the first place. The administrator, it's a brutal job. The reason why I got out of it was I'm not tough enough for it. You know what a big old softy I am. And if I knew that the following day I was having to make 25, 30, 200 people redundant on a working gig, it was, I wouldn't sleep at night, and I just wasn't good enough for it. So it's somebody has to be a corporate undertaker, and somebody has to be the surgeon who's operating the corporate life machine, the life support machine, and that's what the administrators try to do. They try to make sure that they don't go to the undertakers, and they don't care who they sell it to, but they've got to look. They do have the responsibilities towards the creditors.
You see, that's very interesting, Kieran. I think that needs to be stressed more to football fans, because I didn't know that. When Palace went into administration for the first time, I assumed, along with most Palace fans, that the administrator's first responsibility was to the football club rather than to the creditors, because you just go, okay, this guy or this woman is running our administration, we should be fine now, because it's their job to get us through this, but it's not. It's their job to pay the creditors first, isn't it?
That's right. It's to maximise the return. And remember, the creditors are still going to be stiffed to a certain extent. And I think it is a credit to the EFL and the Premier League, in the sense that all unsecured creditors have to get at least 25% of what is owed to them. Otherwise, there will be another points deduction. And this is to stop unscrupulous existing owners gaming the system. And when we did go through a phase of this in the early 2000s, where a club would go into administration, come out of administration the following day, and all of the creditors were unpaid. And I think football realised that it was suffering from a reputational damage perspective. Local suppliers, who tend to be more generous to football clubs than any other customer, because, hey, it's the football club, I'm a supporter of the football club, or my employees are supporters of the football club, so I'll give them a bit more credit. So yeah, it's business. You know, as Don Corleone would say, don't take it personally, it's business.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page and continues to do so despite our confusions with time and age and all sorts of other things. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you. It will get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and to several other options that we're discussing at the moment. And you can do all that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on our regular question show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X, and find us on YouTube. And our new book is out. Well, it's not our new book, it's our old book, but it's sort of new. It's like having a new baby. It's out in paperback, and you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com, and it's already on the shelves in bookshops now. So why don't you buy that, Gov, as an early Christmas present for you? I was going to say your cat, but not all cats are as clever as my one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.